All right, so Howard Schultz, the former and now current interim CEO of Starbucks, is back at the company, and he is once again giving these absolutely bizarre lectures to his workers where he essentially tries to propagandize them into being against this ongoing massive wave of unionization efforts that we have seen at Starbucks over the last couple of months. And so I wanted to show you guys exactly what the latest deranged thing that Howard had to say was. And again, not the first time that he has come out and given these bizarre lectures to his workers, and I'll remind you guys of a previous example of one of those from a couple months ago, but here's what he had to say yesterday, basically. So from Vice News, they say Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz says companies are being assaulted by unions. Assaulted. Okay. And they say Schultz made his remarks on the very same day that the company fired a union organizer at a store in Arizona. And we're going to get into the details of this store worker here in Arizona who was actually fired. But first, let's just go ahead and check in with exactly what he had to say here. So they say Schultz officially returned to Starbucks as the interim CEO on Monday and held a town hall meeting with workers. The company refers to them as partners, in which he said that companies like Starbucks are being assaulted by unionization campaigns, such as the ones at nearly 200 Starbucks stores throughout the country since a store in Buffalo won its election in December. So first of all, since December, we've seen 200 Starbucks stores attempt to unionize. That is absolutely fucking fantastic. This is the type of like wildfire spread that you would have hoped for in a best case scenario from the original Buffalo location winning their union. So that's absolutely amazing. You love to see it. But back to the rhetoric that he's deploying here, right? First of all, calling Starbucks workers partners, right? This is the types of strategies that capitalist enterprises like to use to try to blur the line between owner and worker and try to blur the line between class distinctions that do exist within these corporations. But again, calling them partners as if like that has any substantive meaning when Starbucks employees, largely because they don't have union representation, have no actual voice in the decision-making process of this enterprise. So how are you going to call them a partner if they aren't actually partnered in any of the decision making? That's not what that word means. But again, throwing that out there to try to blur those lines, and of course saying that he is under assault. He is under assault by workers trying to collectively exercise their right to join a union and have their voice heard. Okay, so again, completely ridiculous and pathetic. But they continue saying that the same day, an outspoken organizer and shift supervisor at a store in Arizona was fired, the latest in a string of firings of organizers across the country. Okay, so who's the real one being assaulted in this situation? It seems like you could make a much better case for that employee, but here's the exact quote of what he had to say. He said, "We can't ignore what is happening in the country as it relates to companies throughout the country being assaulted in many ways by the threat of unionization, being assaulted by the threat of workers exercising their collective voices," Schultz said in a clip published by More Perfect Union. And they say Schultz went on to say that he's not anti-union, but he's pro-Star. Oh, okay, so he's just pro-Starbucks. He's not anti-union, guys, according to a partial transcript of his comments that were provided to Vice News. So he's not anti-union. He just thinks that if you try to form a union, you are literally violently assaulting him. Okay, so kind of seems like a little bit of a contradiction there to me, but they continue saying at the same time, according to people who were on the call, Schultz echoed rhetoric that's common among anti-union executives and managers, calling unions outside organizations and referring to Starbucks as a company that does not need someone in between us and our people. Again, trying to frame unions as if they're some external force instead of a direct representation of the workers themselves. Okay, typical, classic rhetoric that you hear from capitalists against union campaigns, but it's all just bullshit. I mean, outside organizations, there's no outside organization. It is the workers. That's what a union is. It is a direct representation of their interests. It is fighting on behalf of their interests, and it is workers literally fighting themselves. They are the ones who are doing the work. They can join these committees. They can, have their voices heard via that union. So it's just completely disingenuous framing, and of course saying like, we don't need somebody to be in between us and our people, as if he gives a single solitary fuck about any individual Starbucks employee outside of his capacity to extract as much surplus value from them as he physically can. But here's where it gets, even better. So they say Schultz also pointed to how the company has grown since he bought it in 1987 when it had just 11 stores, as proof that it doesn't need a union. And he said, quote, "I took us all the way today, Schultz said. We didn't get here by having a union. So again, look at the language that he's using here, saying, I took us all the way, not the, thousands and thousands of Starbucks employees that put in countless hours to build this company from the ground up and providing their labor that provided the value for the company. They didn't build it up. Okay, it was me. It was Howard Schultz. I built it up as your glorious CEO. So why are you guys mad at me? Why can't you just bow down and continue to take these crumbs that I am offering you? I mean, that's essentially what he's saying here. And again, using the bullshit rhetoric that you hear in typical situations like that. But I did want to get into the details of this specific worker who was fired from this location, because this is, first of all, illegal. You're not allowed to fire people in retaliation for attempts to form a union. But of course, it's hard to actually get a legal win over a gigantic corporation like Starbucks. It's hard to prove that this is specifically what you were fired for. And of course, they're always going to make up, bullshit technicality excuses to try to come up with ways to get rid of some of the employees that are leading the unionization efforts. But here are some of the details on this worker. They say, from More Perfect Union, Starbucks on Monday fired a Phoenix-based barista and union leader named Layla Dalton, an act of retaliation that caps 2 months of unrelenting harassment against the 19-year-old shift supervisor. And they say the dismissal comes just 1 day before the National Labor Relations Board sends union election ballots to workers at Starbucks Scottsdale and Mayo location, where Dalton has worked for several years. So again, literally firing her 1 day before they're getting the election ballots, okay? You couldn't really get a more direct correlation here in terms of what's actually going on. But they say, according to a notice of separation provided by 2 district managers, Dalton was fired for recording audio on her phone while performing inventory in the back room of the store. And they say, as More Perfect Union has reported, Dalton has been accosted by her managers on multiple occasions. Footage of the harsh discipline sessions have repeatedly gone viral and stoked outrage at the company. And in March, the NLRB issued a formal complaint against Starbucks for subjecting Dalton to a series of abuses meant to disrupt the union campaign and force her to quit. So the NLRB is filing a formal complaint because of the type of harassment that Dalton has been getting from their managers and from Starbucks corporate. And so of course she's going to want to record. And so this is what she said. She said, I'm always expecting it, meaning harassment, because I'm harassed every single day, she told More Perfect Union. I never know when someone's going to come harassing me, so I always want to be recording. And so you understand exactly what her motivation would be to have this recording accessible to her in case she is then, harassed by one of her managers and they try to force her out, as they did in videos that we have seen previously. And first of all, this isn't against the law. This isn't against any actual rules or regulations or anything like that. Arizona is, as they point out down here, a one-party consent state, meaning that permission is not required to record conversations where the person recording is present. So this is her acting in self-defense, essentially, from a relentless campaign of harassment that Starbucks has been throwing at her. And so, obviously she didn't deserve to get fired for this. She didn't actually do anything wrong. This is, again, just a tactic that we see all the time and that we have seen from Starbucks recently. She's not the only one that's been fired, where they'll go out and retaliate and take out the people who are leading the organizational efforts in an effort to kneecap the unionization attempt. I mean, it's nakedly illegal, but at the same time, again, it's hard to hold them accountable for this and hold them responsible for this. So I'll try to find some specific information on Layla Dalton and put it down in the description in terms of, maybe she has a GoFundMe or something like that, and we could all try to help her out in whatever ways we can. But in addition to that, I am going to link this down in the description, which is just this gigantic list that More Perfect Union has put together of all of the different locations that are attempting to unionize at Starbucks around the United States. So if you happen to live near any of these, then go out, show some solidarity, support the workers there, and do whatever you can to show solidarity to them. But again, I'll link that down below. And just as a reminder, this is not the first time that this freak right here, Howard Schultz, has made some bizarre statements in these lectures. And so I just wanted to remind you guys of this one because it was honestly entertaining, the degree to which he goes to try to push this anti-union propaganda, and just as a additional example on top of the assault of unionization rhetoric that he's using. But here from NBC News, they say former Starbucks CEO uses Holocaust analogy to describe the coffee company's mission. So they say former Starbucks CEO, now interim CEO, Howard Schultz, is facing backlash from employees and on social media after he drew a comparison over the weekend between Holocaust prisoners and the coffee company's mission. So here's what he said, quote, "Not everyone, but most people shared their blanket with 5 other people," Schultz says, adding that he was inspired to share his own blanket with 5 other people. So much of that story is threaded into what we've tried to do at Starbucks, is share our blanket. So he's literally talking about Holocaust victims who were in concentration camps and had to share their blankets, and he's comparing this to how Starbucks, the corporation, is treating their workers, meaning we're just trying to share our blanket with you guys. Don't you understand that we have limited resources, that we're doing the best that we can, and that I guess Starbucks executives feel like they're in a fucking concentration camp? What the fuck is this analogy? I mean, again, you see how deranged he is and how, the extents to which he is willing to go to use bizarre analogies and, weird statements and outlandish statements like he's being assaulted by unionization efforts. You see the extent that they are willing to go both rhetorically and in terms of actions like actually firing workers for attempting to unionize. These are the extents that they are willing to go. This is not something we just saw at Starbucks. We've also covered this on Amazon, the relentless propaganda campaigns that they are facing with, flyers that are put up in every single bathroom stall, and the captive audience meetings that we see as well, where workers are bombarded with, bullshit anti-union propaganda messaging. And so these are the extents that they're willing to go in order to prevent a union from being formed at these locations. And so the lesson from that is that maybe we're on the right track here. If CEOs like Howard Schultz, or CEOs in general, feel like they are literally under assault, then we're probably on the right track, and we should continue in this effort to try to unionize not only Starbucks, but also Amazon and every other workplace around the country that we possibly can. You want CEOs to be afraid. You want the billionaire class to be afraid, because this is where actual power resides, right? We think about these corporations, we think about people like Jeff Bezos and Howard Schultz as if they're like these invincible demigods or something. But the reality is, at the end of the day, they are not the ones that provide the value for these corporations. It is the workers collectively that provide the value for these corporations. And therefore, the solution to a lot of the problems that we have right now in our economic structure is workers need to recognize that their collective action is what will bring them material concessions from the capitalist class in the case of unions, or in the case of actually fully trying to democratize a workplace. So workers are where, and labor is where the actual power within an economic system exists. And so, that's something that you could use to gain a significant amount of leverage over a lot of these CEOs who are now absolutely petrified that workers are going to have some semblance of a voice to stand up for themselves against the exploitation that they are facing from a lot of these corporations.